and then stabs him repeatedly.
Multiple times.
Meanwhile, in Jerome and a couple others of the freed prisoners from Arkham are absolutely giggling.
When I see the one guy and the fact that he's grinning, as Tabitha starts stabbing this guy, it reminds me of Jack Black. The whole face, the attitude, and all that. Just the first thought that came to my mind was, "What is Jack Black doing in this TV show?"
No kidding. I thought that was really interesting. What was interesting to me was Barbara's reaction.
There was no reaction. I
thought she looked almost, scared a little bit to me. Maybe I misread it, and so I started thinking, okay, maybe Barbara isn't as gone as we think. And then I saw the trailer, and I realized, okay, maybe she really is, completely gone.
When I saw the stabbing in her face, it wasn't so much fear; it was curiosity. I really question on not so much how gone is she, but will she ever come back?
Well, it's interesting because in a lot of the comics and everything, Jim marries Barbara, and then they end up having a daughter named Barbara who becomes Batgirl and eventually the Oracle after she's crippled by the Joker.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure how Barbara can come back from this.
No kidding, and I think Leslie Tompkins, who's Jim's love interest right now, it is interesting because the actors are actually dating each other. I think they're probably going to keep her around, and I honestly, for me, anyways, I think these two make a better pair than Jim and Barbara.
Well, yeah, because Barbara was this really high maintenance character, and you kind of understand why, and I realize the whole she killed her parents and blah blah blah, but technically she was under duress to do it, so I don't understand the whole thing.
I'm kind of curious about that because you see Barbara falling apart during season 1, particularly after she gets kidnapped by Victor. She feels really helpless. She doesn't feel like she can stand by Jim, and she goes back to doing drugs and alcohol. She goes back to her parents' place, and you just see how disconnected her relationship was with her parents.
I definitely agree.
And so I'm very interested, to see, whether she can come back from all this, because from the trailer would make you, believe that there is no coming back for Barbara whatsoever.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I personally, at this point, I'm not positive if I really want Barbara to come back from where she is right now, because the whole state of mind and her maniacalness, I think, is what draws me to this show the most. Is not just her, but of course her pairing with the rest. What really kind of caught my eye though is when Barbara first walked into the Arkham Asylum. The whole butler behind her with all the
it looked suitcases. Like she was on her way to the spa.
Not only that, but if you really notice, you got Jerome sitting there, and she looks directly at him, lowers her sunglasses, and just stares there at him. That scene itself really stood out to me because they've never met before. They don't know who each other are, but they shared this moment as she came in, and it really kind of set up the whole scene. And then all of a sudden, they get kidnapped from Arkham Asylum, and they're sitting, they're standing there, and, the whole talking back and forth. It really kind of clues in the whole moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, Jerome is really trying to connect with Barbara. And Barbara seems less than interested at times. I don't know if she necessarily was looking at Jerome when she came in as much as to look at everyone else that was in Arkham and kind of, have a certain level of disdain, because when Jerome eventually, comes and talks to her, she tries to tell him to go away and doesn't seem to be that interested in being with anyone else there, like connecting with anyone else there, until she realizes that it would be good for her to do so.
See, my opinion on what I saw, just this first episode, and the trailer for the second one, is Barbara could possibly become the next Fish Mooney.
I don't know. I think Fish was much more in control than Barbara. Barbara is kind of, I don't know.
But Barbara pretty much.
I think the expression I'm looking for is two sheets to the wind.
Yeah. But if you look at Barbara, the fact that she commands people around her, she wants.
She's very manipulative.
She's very manipulative, and that's pretty much what Fish Mooney was. Fish Mooney was this huge, manipulative person. She was also very powerful. She was very threatening, and I think with time, Barbara could definitely become the next Fish Mooney.
Possibly. I found it interesting just how Theo Galvan tried to connect with Barbara. He goes off and he says her name and looks right at her. And you can see that, she's already under his spell.
Yes, I agree, but at the same point, Barbara's not one to stay under someone's spell for too long.
I don't know, she seemed to be, what did she do, when she hooked up with Sionis? She immediately went off, turned around, got a phone. The first thing she did was to call Jim. And then tried to convince him that she was innocent. And then when that didn't work, she turns around, calls Leslie to start making threats.
Yeah, and she's vindictive. She's very powerful. You look at, and I maybe it's not a fair comparison to compare her to Fish Mooney, played by the most beautiful and wonderful actress.
She was awesome in the first season, Smith.
So it's not entirely fair to compare the two, but I have and I will because I am Captain Fizz and I pretty much do what I want.
No kidding. Yeah.
I am the next Fish Mooney. I am the next Fish Mooney.
Okay. So I guess maybe, as we, start to wrap the show up here, maybe we need... Where do you want this season to go? Because, obviously, it's going to go to hell in a handbasket, and it's going to go there real quick.
See, I definitely want to see the full-blown emergence of the Riddler. That Riddler has always been one of those characters I really enjoy because of the maniacalness. We've definitely... They've hinted at a few other characters that may or may not appear. The Jokers, I definitely would like to see them, maybe announce or reveal that Jerome is the Joker, or definitely start to kind of, act more like the Joker instead of just, teasing at it. But definitely the more villains. I want to see the whole struggle between good and evil, with Gordon, with Bruce Wayne. It's the whole thing, good versus evil. No matter who you are, it's what I want to see.
Absolutely. Although for me, I'm hoping that despite the fact that we're definitely seeing that Enigma is cracking, I want them to continue doing a slow burn to the Riddler. I don't think we necessarily need to see Enigma become Riddler full out during this season because there's so much going on, especially with the Maniacs group coming together. I think. Just let this kind of simmer, and when we finally do see him, he just completely just accept his fate. I want it to be a huge moment, and I want it to be at a point where we're not busy worrying about what Jerome or Barbara or any of the other maniacs or what the Galavans are doing. I want it to be a point where everything just seems to be getting calm, everything seems to be okay. And all of a sudden, bam, we get hit with this, and oh my God, this is the moment we've been really looking for.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of tired of the whole villain an episode. It's a different villain every episode. With the emergence of the Theo and Tabitha.
Tabitha, yeah.
Tabitha, yeah. It definitely sparks the beginning of a long-term villain.
Absolutely, we're going to see a slow burn there. I know that in future episodes we're actually going to see them connect with Bruce Wayne in some way. They have some sort of foster child or someone in their care that's going to become Bruce's friend during this season.
I believe Theo is also on the council for the city, I believe it is.
Yeah, he's on the Fair Business Council or whatever.
Yeah, so he definitely has some huge influence. So it's going to be a remarkable season. My question for you, though, Do you think the Maniacs is a one-season deal, or do you think that there's going to be multiple?
Honestly, just because we don't know most, other than Barbara and Jerome, who we suspect and who everyone's suspecting is going to be the Joker, we don't know who these other people are. So I'm going to assume at this point that these are going to be just a one season, group, and it's to try to keep as much attention away from Theo and Tabitha while they go off and bring together their master plan. Because I honestly believe the real reason why they brought the Maniacs was to distract everybody from what they're actually trying to do.
I do like that theory. It's actually a very legitimate theory of what possibly could happen this season and into next. Theo does seem like a very smart, young man who obviously wants power. There's definitely some resentment. You're not seeing the resentment for who at this point, but it's very interesting of how he took part in the speech, for Commissioner Lowe.
And right there, was a great way for him to go off and to distance himself from the Maniacs being, escaping. And so, there's, most people are going to go off and think that he had absolutely nothing to do with it, and that he's just, a pillar of the community. Yeah. Meanwhile, in the background, while him and Tabitha are, bringing their master plan together, and, from what I've read about these characters, their family has a long history with Gotham, and at some point, they were wronged. And so they're going to take revenge out on everyone who's ever wronged their family.
Yes.
And so I have a feeling that eventually Bruce Wayne may, feel their wrath, because I'm sure at some point the Waynes and the Galavans were on the opposite sides.
Well, most people were in Gotham. But, as usual, our show must come to an end. We're as sad as the rest of you.
Yeah, because I'm kind of curious to see whether we'll see Poison Ivy in the future as well.
Yeah, she's been oddly absent the last little while. So
who knows? I mean, at this point, maybe the less is more, because
they make people want to see her more.
Yeah, absolutely. When she pops up, it'll be interesting.
Although I am curious. You mentioned the whole foster kid program, possibly. Of someone who interacting with Bruce. Wouldn't it be funny if Ivy is that foster child that's interacting with Bruce?
I see. I don't remember the name of the actual child. I don't even know if I think it's a girl. But it's not Ivy. It's, I think they may be a family member, because she refers to Theo and Tabitha as uncle and aunt.
Yeah, well, it could be an interesting storyline if they do with Ivy. I'd like to see Ivy.
Absolutely. I think maybe we'll see her pop up every once in a while. And as we get further and further into the series, maybe in season 3 or season 4, she progressively becomes more and more of a stronger character. I know in the comics she actually becomes a doctor and a biologist.
Well, I understand the biologist part. But basically, so our show has to come to an end.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so you know what, guys? Thanks for listening. This has been a great episode. We'll probably do more episodes on season premieres. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow Captain Fizz.
At Real CAPT Fizz, so at Real Captain Fizz.
You can follow me at That Mask Guy, and you can follow the show at Fizz Mask Show. We're also on Instagram, looking up Fizz and Mask Show. We're on YouTube. Every episode that we have posted on YouTube has now been put into I can't even think.
Playlist.
Thank you. So that's every episode, I believe, up to last Sunday's episode where we talked about WWE Night of Champions,
which was a wonderful night. If you are in the Winnipeg area, you can catch us at Comic-Con this October. We will be loud and proud.
Absolutely. We're gonna get ourselves a couple T-shirts, trying to see if we can at least interview someone from the show. I just went off and sent off an email. Haven't heard back from them yet.
Yeah, so details in progress. So lots of news coming up. We'll keep you updated as it comes in.
So in the meantime and in between time, good night. God bless. May the force be with you.
And as always,